On March 12, 2023, at 8 a.m., Taylor Evans and her daughter, Mia, simply disappeared. No one saw them leave, no one heard from them, and their absence was noticed only by those who loved them. Taylor was the kind of mother who would never leave without a word. She had a job, a life, and a daughter who meant everything to her. The silence that followed her sudden disappearance was deafening. Friends, family, no one had any answers. And those closest to her were desperate for any clue that would explain where Taylor and Mia could have gone. Taylor had always been there for her daughter, always protective, always loving. She would never leave without a word, especially not with Mia, her whole world. But as the hours passed and no one could reach her, worry turned into panic. What had happened? Where were they? It wasn't long before those closest to Taylor realized something was wrong. Her mother, Diane, couldn't believe it. Taylor had been silent for hours, something she never did. They had always kept in touch. So why had she vanished? And why hadn't she called? The mystery only deepened and the police started their investigation. The last person to see Taylor and Mia alive? Ryan Blackwell, Taylor's ex-boyfriend. A man who had once been a part of their lives. A man whose presence seemed innocent enough. But was it really? Could this be more than just a case of a troubled relationship? Was there something darker lurking behind his version of events? Ryan told investigators that he and Taylor had spent the night together. But there were no witnesses to confirm that. He claimed that the next morning, they left in his red Dodge Charger, and he dropped them off at a nearby parking lot before driving away. But what seemed like a simple explanation for Taylor's disappearance didn't add up. Where was the evidence to back up Ryan's story? Why was there no sign of Taylor or Mia after that? The search continued, but every step forward led to more questions. Did Ryan know something he wasn't telling? Was he truly the last person to see them? Or had something more tragic happened? The investigators began to focus their attention on Ryan. His behavior was odd, almost too calm for someone who should have been terrified at the thought of his ex-girlfriend and her daughter being missing. He didn't seem to show the urgency or worry that you'd expect from a man who had just seen his former partner disappear. The deeper the police dug, the more contradictions appeared. Ryan's statement didn't match the evidence. The timeline didn't make sense. He said he had driven them to the parking lot, but there were no cameras, no witnesses, and no one remembered seeing them leave. How was that possible? And why hadn't he reported them missing when he could no longer reach them? By the way, if you're enjoying this video and you're into gripping true crime stories and want to dive deep into unsolved mysteries, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Stick around, because today's story is one you'll want to hear. Now, let's get back to the case you won't want to miss. Taylor Evans was the kind of mother who would do anything for her daughter. A single mother, she had built her world around little Mia. Taylor and Mia were inseparable. They had their routines, their special moments, and their bond was undeniable. Mia was the center of Taylor's life, and Taylor's love for Mia was the very heart of everything she did. They were the kind of family you could count on, together, strong, and full of life. But on March 12, 2023, everything changed. A normal morning, nothing out of the ordinary, and then, nothing. Taylor had plans for that day. She had her life, her job, and a daughter who depended on her. But she and Mia vanished without a trace, leaving behind a silent emptiness. No phone calls, no messages, no sign of where they went or who might have seen them. No one could understand why they were gone. How could a mother and daughter, who had never disappeared without saying something, just vanish? In the days that followed, Taylor's mother, Diane, desperately tried to reach her daughter. She knew something was wrong. Taylor would always check in, especially with Mia in tow. It wasn't like her to just disappear. The family was thrown into panic as they started to search for answers. Was it just a misunderstanding? A miscommunication? Or was something more terrifying at play? The last person to see Taylor and Mia was someone close to them, Ryan Blackwell. He was Taylor's ex-boyfriend, someone who had been part of their lives for years. But there was more to Ryan than anyone realized. Their relationship had been a troubled one, full of ups and downs, but it was only a few months earlier that Taylor had filed a restraining order against him after a violent incident. What had happened between them? And why, despite all that had transpired, had Taylor agreed to meet with him that morning? Ryan said they had been working things out, trying to reconcile. He claimed they had spent the night together, and the next morning, he drove them in his red Dodge Charger to a nearby parking lot. But there was something about his story that didn't sit right. It was too simple, too neat, but no one else had seen them. No one had heard from them after that. And no one could explain why. As the police started piecing together the timeline, Ryan's story quickly started to fall apart. What seemed like a simple account was beginning to look like something more complex, something hidden beneath the surface. Was Ryan telling the truth? Or was he covering up something darker? A story that he didn't want to come to light. The more the investigation continued, the more questions emerged, and every answer seemed to lead to even more. Was Ryan hiding something? Or was this just a tragic misunderstanding? What happened on that morning of March 12th, and why hasn't anyone been able to find out the truth? March 12th, Taylor and Mia had spent the night at a friend's apartment, a brief escape from the chaos that had surrounded their lives. For a while, it seemed like a fresh start. But the next morning, everything changed. The plan was simple: they would leave together, move forward, and leave the past behind. But something happened after Ryan showed up. Ryan claimed that after they spent the night together, he drove them both in his red Dodge Charger to a nearby parking lot. He said he dropped them off and left. A simple explanation, or so it seemed. But something didn't add up. No one saw them leave. No one witnessed the drop-off. And from that moment, there was no sign of Taylor or Mia. Taylor was someone who would never vanish without a word. Her mother, Diane, knew her better than anyone. So when she didn't hear from her, the alarm bells started ringing. It wasn't like Taylor to go silent, especially not with her young daughter in tow. Where was she? As the search began, friends and family were already on edge. The police were quickly notified, and they started to retrace the steps of the last known moments of Taylor and Mia's lives. But when investigators turned to Ryan's account, the truth seemed increasingly elusive. Ryan's story didn't hold up under scrutiny. CCTV footage from the area showed nothing: no car, no sign of Taylor or Mia at the supposed drop-off point. No one had seen them leave. As the hours turned into days, the silence grew louder. It felt as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the missing pieces to fall into place. As the police dug deeper, the questions kept mounting. What happened that morning? Why were there no witnesses? Why had Ryan's version of events become so shaky under investigation? Could it really be a simple misunderstanding, or was there more to this story than anyone had first thought? Every lead seemed to open up new doors, but none of them led anywhere solid. The deeper the police went, the more they realized something was off. Was Ryan's involvement more than just coincidental, or had they stumbled upon something much darker? The investigation had just begun, and it was already clear, this was far from a straightforward case. Ryan Blackwell wasn't just any ex-boyfriend. The more the police dug into his past, the darker it became. Ryan's history was far from clean. In fact, just months before Taylor and Mia's disappearance, Ryan had been involved in a domestic violence incident with Taylor. The tension between them was palpable, one that had been building over time. But now, the question on everyone's mind was, had this tension escalated? Could he have taken it too far? Ryan had been arrested before, but somehow, he always found a way to slip through the cracks. He'd been released on bail after the domestic violence charges, and that was all too familiar. Was this dangerous pattern of behavior ignored for far too long? And had it finally caught up with Taylor and Mia? The investigation revealed a disturbing truth. Text messages from Ryan raised more questions than answers. He had been acting strangely, almost too eager to distance himself from his car, the very car that had been the last known vehicle to have carried Taylor and Mia. Why was he so desperate to get rid of it? And why, when Taylor stopped answering her phone, didn't Ryan seem more concerned? The indifference in his actions only seemed to deepen the mystery. Could Ryan have played a role in their disappearance? Or was it just a tragic accident, a misunderstanding spiraling into wild theories? The more the police uncovered, the more complicated the case became. As the investigation progressed, the detectives found themselves faced with more than just unanswered questions. They had a location, the last known place where Taylor and Mia were seen. The parking lot Ryan had mentioned. But there was nothing there. No sign of them, no video footage, no trace of the pair after Ryan's drop-off. The silence was deafening. Ryan's behavior continued to raise red flags. When detectives questioned him further, his responses were strangely detached, almost as if he was disinterested in the situation. He didn't seem as concerned as one would expect from someone whose ex-girlfriend and her child had disappeared. And when asked about Taylor and Mia, his tone was cold, distant. Was he hiding something? Was his story just a carefully constructed lie? As the police dug deeper, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The evidence was starting to pile up against Ryan, and it wasn't just about the failed relationship with Taylor. They uncovered a much darker past, one that included violent behavior. There was even a previous attempt to harm her. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but they still weren't enough to fully explain what had happened to Taylor and Mia. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, if you're hooked, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because what comes next is even more shocking. Stick around, this case is far from over. After days of relentless searching, the police finally stumbled upon Ryan's red Dodge Charger. It was parked in a secluded area, far from the familiar streets where Taylor and Mia were last seen. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but as investigators approached the car, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The car was covered in blood. Blood that didn't belong to Ryan. The initial shock of the discovery quickly turned into dread as the police realized they had found something much darker than anyone had expected. The blood inside the car wasn't just a sign of a struggle, it was a direct indication of something far worse. The scene was chilling. Taylor and Mia weren't just missing, they had been murdered. The thought was unthinkable, but the evidence was irrefutable. The bloodstains, the placement of the car, it all pointed to one undeniable fact: Ryan Blackwell had been involved in something horrific. The investigation had taken a deadly turn. Inside the car, the investigators found more than just blood. They found personal items belonging to Taylor and Mia, items that shouldn't have been there. A purse that once belonged to Taylor. A phone with messages never answered. These items tied the victims directly to the vehicle, and each piece of evidence revealed a deeper connection to Ryan's actions. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. It wasn't just the blood and the items found in the car. As the police examined the vehicle further, they found the remnants of a violent act, a struggle. The type of struggle that told them Taylor and Mia had fought for their lives. They weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had been targeted. With every passing hour, the investigators grew more certain that they were on the right path. The evidence pointed to one person, Ryan Blackwell. But he wasn't talking. The man who had once been close to Taylor and Mia, who had driven them away from safety, was now a suspect in their deaths. How had it all escalated to this point? And why was Ryan still denying his involvement? As the pressure from the police mounted, Ryan eventually cracked. The evidence was too overwhelming. His alibis didn't hold up, and his attempts to cover his tracks were futile. Cornered, Ryan confessed. His chilling words painted a horrifying picture of what happened that morning, of how he lured Taylor and Mia into his car, drove them to that secluded area, and what transpired next. But his confession didn't bring any relief. The details were too much to bear, and the community was left reeling. How had this once loving relationship turned so tragically wrong? Ryan had planned everything. He had premeditated the murders, and as the police pieced together his actions, it became clear that he had intended for Taylor and Mia to never be found. The confession didn't answer all the questions, though. There were still so many unanswered mysteries. Why had Ryan acted with such coldness? Why had he not reached out sooner when he knew something was wrong? Why did he act so detached during the investigation? With the confession now in hand, Ryan Blackwell was arrested. The charges were clear: murder. The investigators had finally broken through the wall of lies and deception Ryan had built. But what followed next would be just as hard for Taylor's family and the community to bear: the court case. The case moved to court, and for months, the community and Taylor's family waited anxiously. Diane, Taylor's mother, had never left her side. Every court date, every hearing, she sat in the front row, her heart heavy with grief. For her, the trial was an unbearable reminder of the pain she had been living with since that fateful day. Each moment in the courtroom was filled with raw emotion. Diane had to relive the tragic events, the loss of her daughter, the horror of what had happened to Taylor and Mia. As the evidence was presented, it was impossible to escape the gravity of what Ryan Blackwell had done. The courtroom was tense with each witness, each revelation. It was a long, exhausting process, but for Diane, and for the community who had followed this case closely, it was finally time for justice to be served. As the trial came to an end, the jury deliberated. The weight of the evidence, Ryan's confession, and the emotional testimonies from the family, including Diane, made it clear. Ryan Blackwell was guilty. He had planned and carried out the murders of Taylor and Mia. The truth had come to light, and now, it was time for the sentence. Ryan Blackwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A harsh sentence, but a necessary one. Justice had been served, but for Diane and the rest of the family, it didn't bring Taylor or Mia back. No verdict, no sentence, could ever undo the pain that they had endured. In the days following the verdict, the community felt the weight of the tragedy. Taylor and Mia had been taken too soon, and their loss was felt by everyone who knew them. A memorial was held in their honor, with hundreds of people coming together to mourn and remember the two lives that had been lost. Diane stood before the crowd, her voice trembling with emotion, but her message was clear: Taylor and Mia would never be forgotten. She spoke about their love, their bond, and the joy they had brought into the world. Diane made it known that no matter what happened in the courtroom, no matter the years that passed, her daughter and granddaughter's memory would live on. The community, too, came together. The memorial wasn't just a moment of mourning, it was a celebration of the love and joy that Taylor and Mia had shared with everyone they met. While the pain of their loss would never fully fade, the love that surrounded them and the memory of their lives would endure forever. Taylor and Mia's story is a tragic reminder of how sometimes, the people closest to you can harbor dark secrets. It's a heart-wrenching truth that no one could have foreseen. But no matter what, their memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved them. The love they shared will never fade, even though their lives were taken too soon. For Diane, and everyone who knew Taylor and Mia, the pain of their loss will never truly go away. But they take comfort in the memories, the moments of happiness that Taylor and Mia gave to the world. And though justice has been served, the scars remain. What do you think happened? Was this a premeditated act of violence, carefully planned, or was it a tragic mistake that spiraled out of control? Could there have been a different outcome if things had gone another way? Let me know what you think in the comments. Your thoughts mean a lot. If you want more gripping true crime stories like this one, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the next case I'm covering is even darker, and you won't want to miss it.